axle out of the way, and I can access these bolts below for the lower ball joint now. Now, in doing that, my amazing spatial reasoning skills are coming into play, realizing that this is the last thing that is holding this heavy steering knuckle into place. So I want to be very careful when I remove the last bolt to not let this fall down onto my foot. And I'm hoping it is becoming very obvious that this video is really next to useless, even though it's showing you pretty much step by step what to do, because you still have to do it yourself. And if you're doing this on a model other than this one, there's going to be slight differences, but guess what? You'll be able to figure them out. All right, and because this bolt just keeps spinning and spinning, kind of like the brake caliper did, I will have to put a backup wrench there to catch the other side. Okay, so now we've removed our knuckle. And the whole idea is, it seemed to me it would be a lot easier to replace these ball joints on my workbench as opposed to working underneath the car with stuff falling in my face all the time. So it looks like we got another cotter pin here. That's right, I'm actually showing you a cotter pin. I'm gonna hope if you try to do this yourself, you will have the aptitude to be able to discover and remove cotter pins that are preventing bolts from turning. All right, so once again, a couple ways to remove these. We can try our pickle fork, since we are going to be replacing these anyway, and I am not worried about destroying the seal, which already is destroyed anyway. But I actually really do find it easier to just use this tool over any other method, to be honest with you. So it'll be nice and easy to install this new one, and I notice there's a hole in the top of it, so there must be a grease fitting that's included in this little bag of parts here. Just, you have to have unbelievable perception. How would anybody without having a rocket science degree ever be able to figure this out without YouTube or a book? I'm telling you, there is a grease fitting right there. All right, and how easy it'll be to just fill this with grease on the bench. All right, that feels good. When I install this new guy, I do want to pay attention a little bit to the bolt pattern, get it in the ballpark, at least for the top ball joint in the upper control arm, but it doesn't have to be exact because we will be able to manipulate it a little bit. So let's get this on. And I'm counting to make sure I got the same number of threads as before, and also finish tightening so that the castle nut is out of the way of the hole for the cotter pin. There we go. The kit even came with a new cotter pin. All right, bottom ball joint. Gosh, I guess it's going to be the same exact thing. Do you really need to see this? Well, apparently so, because videos like this that show every single step that a monkey can do get millions and millions of views, and I need the cash. I will say this is far easier with air tools, but you can do it with hand tools. It's just going to take you a hell of a lot longer. By the way, notice how sloppy this lower joint is. I'll bet I could probably almost take it right out of the socket. Wow, that's crazy. Let's see if the pickle fork will work on this one here, just out of curiosity. Get that stabilized. There we go. Actually, it did work. Okay. Yeah, that is one messed up ball joint. Wow. This new ball joint, I am wondering, I'm going to have to think now before I get all excited. Is it going to be easier to install the lower ball joint into the car And the answer is going to be a resounding yes, I believe. It will be, because of the trouble that I had using that backup wrench before. So I think the right thing to do is going to be to install this part into the car first. And I'm going to tie this guy out of my way a little bit. Your primary, basic, fundamental requirement, if you are going to actually do stuff yourself instead of just reading stuff and watching videos, is to be able to install things in the reverse that you remove them. So in other words, remembering which direction this ball joint faced and which directions the bolts went. And you're never going to be able to do that watching your computer or anything like that. You will learn that when you actually do this, and you have to take notes or pictures or just plain have a good memory. As you can see, doing this stuff does not take 2 minutes. You actually have to put some sweat and hours into it. And then we're gonna go ahead and loosen that thing up. So this is obviously gonna have to go on first, and then through the hole for the knuckle. There we go. Then I'm going to take my castle nut and loosely thread it onto the new ball joint stud so that this will stay in place. All right, now to get my new ball joint through this hole here, I'm not going to be able to do this by myself. So once again, I will have to use spatial reasoning skills. So do not ever attempt to try to fix your own car unless you are a certified genius. So luckily, I did see this trick on the Mensa examination. And I'm just going to use a jack to lift up the lower control arm into position so that I can install the bolts for my upper control arm. All right, and once you get that first one lined up, you can use it to draw the mechanism up. And then I typically use a screwdriver to kind of line up the holes to then feed my second bolt in. And then once you got 2 of them in, you are good to go. And then we're going to reach our tie rod end in there. And since we're reusing that, we'll do the same nut. And remember, I counted how many threads it was so that I have an idea of the torque. But because I'm going to be doing this again off camera, I'm not worried about the torque right now, so I'm not going to look up the spec right now. And remember, we still have to tighten the lower ball joint because the upper ball joint we took care of on the bench. And make sure you tighten up anything else that you've loosened up. Checking that my cotter pin hole is open. All right, and here I am having a little problem here with this tie rod nut. Just free spinning. So what I'm going to do is put a little tension on it with the pickle fork. Like that. And then by pushing up, I can create some resistance. There we go. And then some grease onto the shaft and also the splines to make sure that we can take this thing apart again if we need to in the future. All right, as long as I did remove those bolts that I actually really didn't need to remove, but if you are replacing the rotor, which this one really needs replaced, however, the person cannot afford it that I am doing this for, so we're just gonna go with what we got. You can insert a screwdriver or a pry bar or something behind this captor and the rotor and just walk back and forth side to side until it comes a little bit loose, and then you can put some pry bars on either side and just kind of wobble it out like that. And this would be the rotor that you would replace if you were getting a new rotor. And this hub here would be something that A, you would reuse, and B, inside of the hub is actually some bearings, which I would recommend replacing, but unfortunately we're not going to be able to do that in this video. But what you would do is remove the dust seal. You will destroy the dust seal in the process, and remove this with a small screwdriver or a chisel is what I usually use, and then you'll remove the inner bearing and cup, replace them, and then put the new seal back on. To reinstall this thing, I know, it's a brain teaser. You put the captor back over the rotor, you line up the bolt holes, and you just walk it on by alternating the bolts until it's all the way on. All right, make sure this rotor is grease-free. All right, and I do have a video on how to do a brake job where I'm a little friendlier, but that was before I realized how ridiculous it is to make bolt-by-bolt videos, honestly. So let's see here. We need to remember the assembly pattern. So the first thing that goes in is our bearing. So I'm going to pack this bearing with grease as best I can. I don't really have a proper grease packer. And then next came this weird little spinny thing. And clearly there must be some special tool for this, but all I know is I'm going to put it back to where it was, because there's screw holes that will line up with some slots here, just like that, so I know I'm not overloading that bearing behind it. Here's what I mean by the screw hole lining up with the tab, because when we put this disc on, you will see the tabs force the disc to only go one way, and we want the screw holes to line up so that we can reinsert them and they'll be aligned. I know, it's like having to be a frickin' engineer, isn't it? And then our back retainer went back on here, and that is slotted to fit in the slots. And the little clip, again, everything just has little slots in it. Really, there is no skill in doing this. If you can do this, you can do an alternator, you can do a CV axle. It is just a matter of just looking at it and just using common sense to figure it out. All right, and then the retainer ring, of course. And make sure that these are pushed back so I can see the groove. And I'm just gonna push that on with a screwdriver till it clips right there into place. And now for these bolts that I thought I needed to remove but actually did not, but that's okay. When you figure stuff out on your own, you sometimes kind of learn through trial and error. The best part is, if I ever do one of these again, I will never forget how to do it. One of the things I do know through common sense, I know this is installed right. First of all, because the retainer ring fit into its groove, there's no way it would fit into that groove unless everything was pushed back as it's supposed to be. The second thing, I know if I get stuck, I always have the other side of the car that I can look off of. And then reattach your brake assembly. You know what? You don't need to see that. I'll let you guys figure that one out. Finally, the retainer cap here. And of course I was missing bolts, so I'll have to find some new bolts at an auto parts store or something. Sorry to be brutally honest and everything, but the fact of the matter is, a monkey can do this, a monkey can do any parts changing. The real skill is in diagnosing what needs to be done. But I'm going to go ahead and end the video here and let you guys go ahead and select how much of an adventure you want to go on. Do you want to actually get your hands dirty and actually do some of this stuff? Or do you want to keep on dreaming about it, watching trucks and reading your Haynes manual and watching all of the YouTube videos going, oh, well, now I know how to do it. So I'll leave that to you. Anyway, have a good day. Hope you found this helpful.